Welcome, everybody, inside the coach's office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, alongside my co host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, back to our Sunday 8 p.m. time slot. And it's the start of spring training and always an exciting time. And we got a returning guest on to help us break down the Tigers offseason and get us ready for spring training. But before I bring him on, Brian, how you doing? How's your weekend going?
Hey, things are well. Just that fall spring got me excited for spring and baseball and all that fun stuff. And then we're kind of back to reality the last couple of days with the snow. But getting a chance to talk to this guy again is awesome. Gets me really excited. So it's all good, all good spot right now.
Yes, sir. So here we are. So from Just Baseball, it's Clay Snowden. Clay, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on. Always a joy to talk to you all.
Absolutely. And last time we talked, Clay, the Tigers were coming off. They had resigned, a couple of their players. They resigned Finnegan, Torres came back, and Flaherty came back, and then they signed Kenley Jansen, a closer, veteran closer. But no big splash moves, at that point. We were kind of wondering, are they going to go out and get a big hitter? You had talked about, that you thought they should add some more starting pitching. And sure enough, a few weeks later, Tigers make a huge splash move and signed Framber Valdez, 3 years, 115 million. What were your initial thoughts when it first went down? And now that you've had a little bit of time to kind of digest it, what are your overall thoughts on the signing?
Well, this is why you wait till the offseason is over to judge the offseason because a lot changed in just the past few weeks. And when Framber signed, I thought it was a statement move from the organization. We have heard a lot of rumblings about just how good is this team going to be. They're missing something. Everyone thought it would be a bat. Bats were not really on the market. It wasn't really lining up. And we even knew that kind of going into the offseason that it was only a couple of bats that really made sense. We saw that Scott Harris could rebuild a farm system. We saw that he could make a playoff team. The question I think in everyone's mind was, would he be able to take a good team to a great team? And this is at least the effort to do so. These are the type of moves you need to make to take a good team to a great team. So I thought it was just a fantastic signing. Framber Valdez is one of the more consistent starting pitchers that we've seen over the past 5 or so years. A proven winner, World Series experience, familiarity with AJ Hinch. Like, I just thought the stars aligned there, and I'm glad that they were able to shell out the money without having to give him some 5, 6, 7 year deal. It's a relatively short deal with opt-outs too. So in my mind, it was a perfect move that made a lot of sense.
I'm glad you mentioned. You talked about his impact. Right away, because I wanted to ask you, because I don't think people in the Detroit area realize how good this guy is and how good he's been. And so he's obviously probably not, he's not Tarek Skubal level, but nobody is. So where would you rank him in terms of starting pitchers in the American League?
Well, he's top 10 for sure. I don't even think that's something you could debate. I think he's truly up there. And some would have him pretty high, considering again just how consistent he's been. We've seen some pitchers come out and they're great one year, and there's injuries. Whenever you talk about them for 1 minute, then you talk about all this injury or this season for 3 minutes, right? There is none of that with Framber. And one thing I like about him a lot is I think he's going to age well. He is not a flamethrower that you're worried about something popping in his elbow and coming back, and he loses a little bit of velocity and he's no longer very good. That's not his style. He's a heavy ground ball pitcher, over 55%, I think, ground ball rate. So I think that will age well. It's gonna play well as well. So like I said, it's just kind of the perfect marriage, in my opinion, of upside, of kind of what he's been able to do in track record, but also term. Him not being signed super long term, I thought was a really savvy move by the front office to give him more money, give him the opt outs he wants to avoid paying him for 5 or more years.
And were you surprised that the Tigers were able to get him for a 3 year deal, that maybe there wasn't a little bit more, competition for him to maybe drive the number up? Because it kind of came out of nowhere, because we weren't really hearing anything about the Tigers with Valdez, but there was kind of quiet around him in general. Were you surprised the Tigers were able to make this deal?
Yeah, in the beginning of the offseason, I had a call with our editor, at Just Baseball, and we were going through the top free agents and landing spots and working through all of it. And we got to Framber, and I said, he makes a lot of sense for the Tigers, but I mean, I don't think they'll give him the money in the term, right? And our editor actually put the Tigers as his destination spot back in November, but I think it was like 5 years and, obviously more money, not a higher AAV though. But I just didn't really think it would be realistic because we had not seen Scott Harris do that yet. And this was the offseason where they needed to make a bigger move. I think we talked about that last time I was on your old show, and they did. I mean, whatever reservations anyone has about Scott Harris, he's done a lot to kind of reverse those. Now, will it work? Will it pan out? We don't know, but that doesn't mean that the process is wrong. The results will vary, but if you have good process, and in my opinion, when you're as close as the Tigers are with the combination of youth on their team, their current contract situation, not a lot of money tied up long term, in this one more year of Tarek Skubal, presumably, you need to go for it. And Framber is the type of signing of we're going for it.
We talked about all the positives that Valdez brings. The one concern last season in Houston looked like a situation where he intentionally crossed up his catcher, got frustrated. Is there any type of concern there? Obviously, you talked about all the things he brings physically, but just between the ears, is there any concern with maybe his composure?
Yeah, I don't know. That was a funky situation. And, the catcher and the manager said, of course, what they would always say, no matter what the actual intent was, that it was not intentional. I just looked through the track record. He had no issues coming up, no issues in his first few seasons. A cross-up situation that we really don't know the answer to. If it was up to me, I would say, yeah, I think that was intentional. But who knows him? AJ Hinch knows him. In all of the videos we've seen, all of the interviews that we've seen of Valdez, the little snippets on social media, he seems like a likable person. He's lighthearted, he's goofing around with the social team and whatnot. Like, there's nothing that's showing me in a larger scale that this guy is a problem. So I'm just going to lean towards he's not. And I wish I could give credit because I don't remember who it was. One of the reporters talking about AJ and his quotes about kind of signing off on him as a person and bringing him in. So that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I completely agree there. It did come up a little bit. I'm like, it is a little concerning a little bit, but you do some research as you mentioned. Hopefully it was just a one-time thing, and we're not going to see that come about again. And I wouldn't, with Dylan Dingler and Jake Rogers behind the plate, I have a tough time seeing a situation like that come up again. Just a few days later, after the Valdez signing, which was, just a huge splash move that the Tigers made, they followed up by signing Justin Verlander to a 1-year deal for $11 million. Most of it deferred, actually to 2030, which is pretty interesting. But he brings so much nostalgia, so much memories. Brian and I actually did a Detroit Sports Retro show the other day where we looked back at Justin Verlander's no-hitter from 19 years ago in his second year in the league in 2007. And just looking back at that and just the memories and so much nostalgia Justin Verlander brings. What were your thoughts when the Tigers made this deal, Clay?
I was out on the Tigers signing Verlander as the primary starting pitching signing. That's what I was afraid of, was that they would lean into that and that would be their move and they would hope it would be good enough with the fans. As the secondary signing, as the fifth starter, I think it is perfect. I like it a lot, actually. Now, when the news broke, I was concerned, oh my gosh, what's going on with Reese Olson, right? And that was a big loss. But the front office, once again, I give them a win for this. Instead of sitting there and saying, well, look how good Troy Melton looked in a sample size. We brought in Drew Anderson and listing excuses not to add. They said, nope, we're going to go ahead, bring back Justin Verlander, bring him back to the team that drafted him, where he started his career, where he made a name for himself, and give him a chance to retire on top. Last year, he was a good pitcher. He wasn't fantastic, but he was really solid. And the numbers he put up last year, you can't just copy and paste them. But anything in that realm is going to be good as a fifth starter on this team. So I love the signing. I love that he's getting an opportunity to join this team when they're back up on the upswing and give him a chance to bring a championship to Detroit.
How much do you think he has left? He has talked about in the past of trying to get, pitch till he's 45.
Yeah.
He's close to getting to 300 wins, but it's probably going to take him to pitch to 45 to get to 300. Do you think this is his last year in one more run, or do you think he's got, more in the tank than that?
I thought his career was over after the multiple injuries that, coming back from the Mets and Houston and whatnot. And he proved me wrong. I thought last year, I really wanted the Tigers to avoid him last year, to be honest with you. And then he went out and pitched pretty dang well for the Giants. And at this point, I won't put anything past him. We are seeing pitchers pitch further into their careers with the advancements in technology and the willingness some of them are now to. I don't want to go off on too far of a tangent here, but what helps extend your career is being willing to change your pitch mix, what you use the most. Can you now lean less on your fastball and more on your breaking stuff and kind of become more of a savant on how to work through lineups? And the data we have now helps pitchers better understand that adjustment they need to make. So I think pitchers can go deeper in their careers than before. And I'm not going to say that this is his last year. I mean, I guess we need to see how it goes. Now, if the Tigers win a World Series, it would be pretty tempting to just hang it up and, go into Cooperstown with the D on the cap.
That would be the absolute perfect ending, and to bookend his career like that would just be absolutely incredible. What I found interesting, I heard Cody Stavenhagen talk about on his podcast, and he was there for Verlander's first bullpen session a few days ago, and he just talked about, for one thing, it went like 30, 40 minutes long, and just how attention to detail that he was, and multiple times, taking Dylan Dingler aside and just going over certain things, exactly where he wanted his mitt to be, exactly where he wanted his body position to be. And when I heard that, I thought, man, what a good influence he is going to be on the rest of the staff, especially some of those younger pitchers in the staff, like a Melton and a Montero and those guys, and Casey Mize, and even Skubal, even as good as he is, I'm sure he's going to pick Verlander's mind and get a few things. I think that's going to be such a huge positive for this team.
You don't pitch as long as he has without learning a thing or two along the way. And it's funny when you listen to players who are rookies or first, second year talk about what they did in the offseason. It's usually pretty broad. I worked on my fielding. I worked on this. As they go throughout their career, you notice those interviews start to get very specific. I worked on my changeup grip or whatever it may be. And those are the type of experience things that you can take away from someone like Justin Verlander. He's willing to teach. Everyone just needs to be a sponge. He's going to have some, for lack of a better term, shortcuts that pitchers are going to be able to take from. And that's something that even if he doesn't pitch the full season or, whatever the case may be with how this season goes for him, I do think that there's value in having it in camp with some of these younger arms and guys who are next year presumably going to be helping kind of step up in the rotation. As Skubal, Miley, Remise, Flaherty, whoever, there's going to be some weight on the younger shoulders. Some weight on the shoulders of the younger pitchers as well.
Hey, by the way, sorry I lost you guys for a few minutes. Technology and dealing with that is not my skill set. But if you addressed this already, I apologize. But what do you think, realistically, the number of innings we can expect out of Verlander this year, right, from the 5-starter spot? And then what would you say is the best case scenario? Because obviously worst case scenario nobody even wants to think about, and that's
Sure.
right, you know what I'm saying? But what would you say is pretty realistic, the expectations, and then best case scenario?
I would imagine 120, 130 innings would be approachable for him. If you're doing the math, that means he probably misses a couple starts, and that's probably to be expected at some point. That happens with most pitchers, and that's someone his age. I would imagine he'd miss sometimes, but I mean, if I said he gave 120 innings at 4.35 ERA or 4.4 ERA and struck some guys out, had some awesome moments in Comerica and helped the team when so-and-so was injured and he had to step up. You know, if I painted that picture, I think we'd all sign up for that. He doesn't have to come out and be vintage Verlander. That's not exactly the role that he's expected to fill right now. The role is just to help steady the rotation. And I like that personally. I like that the pressure is not for him to lead the staff or be the number 2 or the big name free agent. It's come in here, do what you pretty much did last year, and help us build the depth through the minors. So everyone moving down a spot kicks presumably Troy Melton to the minors and maybe Kyler Montero, and you're building depth that way instead of signing 31-year-old career AAA guy to be your depth.
With these signings and then pretty much bringing back the entire playoff roster from last year and then adding Valdez and Verlander, where do you think that puts them in the American League, and what do you think their expectations are now?
I think that they're one of the best teams in the American League. I know that's not shocking. They went far enough to prove that last year, and they returned, you know, a huge chunk of their team from last year. Of course, they faltered down the stretch, and they did not do enough to address the offense. And that is a sticking point. And I think that's a fair call out. I also think that it's possible to understand the reasoning why. If Colt Keith can take a step forward, and he did from his rookie year to last year, if you just took his stats and said, this 23-year-old did this, would you want them on the Tigers? People would be like willing to trade all kinds of prospects for that player. It's just because he's the guy that we've seen the past 2 years. He hasn't had the power. It just doesn't feel like he's taken the steps that he has so far. And I think Kevin McGonigal is like a legitimate piece, not just like the top prospect who could get called up in the second half of the year. That's kind of how I view Max Clark. I was like, I think he'll contribute this year, but I'm not 100% sure, maybe later part. I think Kevin McGonigal could contribute right away. I do think he'll go to the minors for a period of time. And we've seen this with other organizations. It's not a Scott Harris is afraid of X, Y, and Z. This is very common. And I think he gets called up relatively soon if all is going well, because that's a position at shortstop that they could upgrade. McKinstry's a good, fine player, especially as a bench piece. And Baez at this point, I think, is a better utility guy than starter. So there's a path to the roster and a path to improving the team with a top 5 prospect in the game. And I usually wouldn't say that about a prospect, but prospects don't have the hit tools that McGonigal has. I believe he was the first 80 grade hit tool that Baseball America has ever given out.
What did you take from him being the opening day spring training starter at shortstop the other day? Can you read into that, or
I really don't know. But I did think it was cool that we all got to see kind of how good he was. I mean, you saw 100 miles an hour on the outside part of the plate, and he smacked it 104 point something to left field. Like, that is exactly what you would see from like a vet. That looked like a veteran at bat. He didn't try to do too much. He didn't try to pull the ball. He didn't try to do anything more than what he should have, which is great to see from a guy trying to make an impression and prove himself in camp. And I think that, just from what I've watched him throughout the minors, I've watched him a lot. That's like what he is. That's not just like a gimmick that we saw once. That is who he is as a hitter. So that's why I have such a confidence in him being able to at least be above average as a rookie. It's just because of how advanced he is as a hitter. This isn't a typical rookie. Like, I did not think Colt Keith would be anything close to what I think Kevin McGonigal would be as a rookie only. So for their 2020 season, I just have such high expectations for him being a step up offensively than what we have. I don't think he'll come in and be a 130 WRC plus 300 hitter as a rookie, but I do think he could be well above average especially compared to what we've had at shortstop the past few years.
If you don't think he's going to be the opening day shortstop, what do you think it's going to take for him to get that spot? Is it somebody? Is it going to? Are we going to have to wait for an injury? Is it going to somebody who just has a slow start? Like, obviously, you know, if McGonagall's on the roster, somebody has to be off the roster. So somebody's going to have to come. Somebody's going to get bumped out. So let's say McGonagall is on this team, who do you think is going to be that odd man out?
Yeah. So the reason why I don't think he'll make the opening day roster is he has like 42 games above single A. I just think that they want to get him a little bit more down there. But if if he shows out in spring training, it's going to be really hard. And for the people that say, this is service time manipulation, we have proof that Scott Harris has not done that. I mean, Colt Keith and Jackson Jobe could have had that treatment, and neither one did. Those are the only two examples we have truly in the Scott Harris era. So that's not an excuse, in my opinion. I do think the domino effect of it all would be assuming no injuries, which is, tough to do. I think you could do something where Winston Perez would be sent down. He has options. It's not because I think he's bad or anything. Matt Vierling is back in the mix, and Parker Meadows is obviously back and healthy. And I think that they would keep Parker up because of his defense and speed. And then that would allow Javi to play center if need be. It would allow McKinstry to be a true utility. Jamai Jones is also there. And if they want to send Jones down, it would have to be a DFA scenario. I just don't see them doing that right away. If they did, I wouldn't mind that much, not because I think Jones is bad, but like those guys are a lot easier to find. He was really good last year, but over his career that, doesn't look to be the case. And so I do think that there's a relatively simple domino effect to get him on the roster, even assuming no injuries.
And just to circle back to where you think the Tigers line up in the American League, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. These were the current odds to win the American League. And I found this pretty interesting to see that the Tigers are still kind of down there a bit, at 9-1 odds behind Baltimore. I thought was pretty fascinating. But obviously behind the Yankees, you got Seattle, Toronto, Boston, and then Baltimore, pretty much almost the entire American League East above the Tigers. When you see these odds, Clay, what do you think? And who do you think are some of the teams that are going to be the biggest obstacles for the Tigers this season?
I would flip-flop Baltimore and Detroit, but other than that, I think it's pretty good. And of course, when you look at the odds, it's so close that more or less it's just flip-flopping those two. The Yankees, I'm not as crazy about as these odds would say. I do think Boston, Toronto, and Seattle are all, right up there. But all you got to do is be in the mix. I mean, this team is obviously well within reach of any of these teams, really. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with the Mariners last year, right? And like Boston's a solid team, and they've added this offseason. And I think that they have a lot of star power, and I could see it all clicking for them. But when it gets down past them, like Baltimore, Detroit, Houston, that does feel like the next tier to me. And I think that Detroit is the top of those three.
With the Tigers' additions of Verlander and Valdez, where would you rank their pitching staff amongst the American League?
I think that they have a better pitching staff than the Yankees. I think Seattle's is better than Detroit's, but all of them are so close. Toronto's really good. Boston's really good. I mean, it's tough. These are great rotations. I'm not even talking about bullpens. Well, once you get into the bullpen, it gets a little trickier to do, but I don't know, man. It's one of those things, when you look at it now and you look at it in June, it's going to be totally different.
Yeah.
It's going to be totally different. And that is one thing I like about the Tigers is building the depth by pushing younger guys to the minors, knowing you'll have injuries, you'll have X, Y, and Z happen, and you're going to need Troy Melton for 10, 15, 20 starts this year, and Peter Montero, and, the list goes on, or Drew Anderson bumping to the rotation. But I would say the Tigers are, I'll say top 3 in the AL, top 4, 3 probably.
And then you mentioned, you just want to get in. You want to be in the mix. You want to get in the playoffs. And a lot of that is, getting a guaranteed spot by winning the division. And I wanted to pull these odds up because these are the central odds. And, the Tigers are first, at plus 115. But second, I think maybe some people would be surprised that it's not Cleveland. It's the Kansas City Royals that are quite a bit ahead of Cleveland in terms of the odds. What are your thoughts on Kansas City? And do you think this maybe is the year they kind of fell back a little bit last year, but they still have a lot of great young talent? Do you think this is the year maybe they get over the hump a little bit?
Yeah, and they had a good offseason. It wasn't fantastic or anything, but it was solid. They're relying on a lot more youth within their lineup. Jack Caglione and Carter Jensen are two rookies with a lot of upside and power, but they're still young and they still have a lot of questions to be answered. And of course, the rotation's good. They're one of those teams that I kind of feel like they were closer to last year's Tigers team, where you could see a lot of why you like them, and if this goes right, then yeah, you bump them up a little bit. But this and this could go wrong, and next thing you know, they're kind of sliding. I do think that they're a good team. Are they better than the Guardians? I don't know. The Guardians every year seem to outperform what I think they will, so I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. I will say the Twins are. Man, Pablo Lopez news and his injury, that's one of, if not their best players, and that hurts. And the White Sox have improved. So it really comes down to those two teams at the bottom. I flip-flop them. And I would also say the Twins could be the team where you look to stack wins this year, kind of like how it was with the White Sox in previous years. But the Royals being 2 and the Guardians being 3, those teams are pretty close for me, but I would probably put the Guardians above just because they've proven more, and I'm tired of doubting them.
We talked a lot about Kevin McGonigal and maybe some of the roster positions, but just as we begin spring training or the spring training games this weekend, what are some interesting things that you're kind of looking towards over this next month? Maybe it's a key position battle, maybe it's some battles in the bullpen. What are some key things that you're kind of keeping your eyes on this spring training for the Tigers?
The first one is not the most interesting one, but the one that I'm watching closely is Hao-Yu Lee and Max Anderson. Where are they playing? Who's getting more playing time? Who's getting more opportunities? I don't think either one of them make the opening day roster. A number of injuries could change that, but I do think that they'll be one of the first players called up. And there's going to be a platoon situation for them if they are. So I'm looking at how they both do defensively at third. Lee came in during the first game as a substitution at third and then started today, Sunday's game, at third. Anderson came in at second and started at second today. So those two are going to be battling for kind of the depth spot that could kind of come up. So I'm really watching that. Other than that, it's kind of like the outfield. How's it going to shake out? Is Parker Meadows going to be good enough to be the starting center fielder? Is Matt Vierling going to look good in spring and all of a sudden, wow, he's healthy? We knew what he did 2 years ago, and he was a jolt to this team. Could he start in right if Perez doesn't do well? And so kind of how the outfield shakes out is one. The platoon infield battle with Lee and Anderson's two. And, of course, the bullpen, as it is with every spring training, you're watching the bullpen. There's always a spot or two open, particularly if they can find another lefty. Just as kind of the third option there.
You brought up the outfield, and you've brought up Parker Meadows a few times, and I keep going back to it. And I've said this to Dan a ton. To me, he's the guy that if he hits 270, and again, he had his development was hindered last year. Got hurt in spring training, right? I think that affected him all year. But if you get 270 and a solid on base percentage from the leadoff spot, that's just going to make your lineup that much better. So talk to me if you could, maybe not about him specifically, but is there I know you mentioned a handful of players, but is there somebody in particular that you're gosh, if this guy goes off, this offense is just going to be become really good. Right? Because there were times last year where the offense was really good, right? And then obviously at the end it wasn't great. But is there somebody, maybe it's not Parker Meadows, but is there somebody to you that man, if that dude just hits what we think or what the Tigers hope that he can hit, just changes everything?
Yeah, I think Parker Meadows is 1A and 1B with the guy that I'll choose just to stray from you, Coach. But I think Parker Meadows is a really talented player, and that's why it's exciting, right? And like that's why you think like he could be the spark plug because he has all the tools. I worry about how much he'll hit. Ultimately, like I think he'll draw walks, steal bases, play great defense, have some power. I wonder how much he swings through, and then the platoon scenario. The guy I'll choose is Colt Keith, and it really is because he kind of has every box checked except for two, and those two boxes are power and hitting against lefties. Last year he did well against lefties, but in limited samples, kind of, Hinch was platooning. If they say go out there, you're going to hit every day against lefties, prepare all off season to be an everyday player. I think he can do it. I think has the talent. We saw it in the minors. We've seen the progression the first 2 years, and we've seen stretches that look awesome. Now he's making good swing decisions. He's drawing walks. If he can just get a little bit more comfortable, where he's recognizing pitches earlier and getting his A swing off earlier because of that. So when you see fastball, to start earlier, and you were able to pull that ball for power. That's kind of the next step. I feel like when he watches at bats, he's a little hesitant, right? Like he's not fully committed to what he's seeing. He's not trusting his eyes. That comes with time. And if he starts putting together more confident swings, I do think the power can come. And I wouldn't be surprised if he had 25 home runs and was a big part of this offense. I also wouldn't be surprised if he had 15 home runs and kind of looked more of the same. But that's the type of guy I think could be a big switch for them.
And Clay, we're getting close to the end here, but I want to get your opinion. After all these moves, we talked about the American League and their odds, but what do you think the ceiling is for this team this season? It feels very much like kind of a last dance scenario with it possibly being Scooble's last season with the Tigers, might be Verlander's last season period. A lot of guys on 1-year deals. We don't know about the lockout and all that's pending. Like it feels very much like a last dance type season and a very special season ahead of us. But what do you think the ceiling is for this team?
I am truly, I pride myself on being fair and honest. Like that's what I like to do. And I truly do think that they could make the World Series or even win the World Series. I mean, the Dodgers are, that makes it tough. But I think that they have that type of pitching staff, and we see how important the starters can be. The other thing to remember here, I know McGonigal will come up this year, maybe even Clark can come up and be a spark plug. Like that could help, but there's still a trade deadline. And if they're being this aggressive at the end of the offseason, signing 2 pitchers, who's to say that they wouldn't make a trade if there's a position that they need? I'm not predicting that they would, trade a top prospect, but at some point this season, we're going to learn a lot about some of these players like Keith, like Torkelson. Like, was Torque going back to 2024? Or is he more 2025? Like, we'll learn more about some of these players and at some point say, okay, now we know what they more or less are. We have to address this. We have to move this guy. Or let's say Colt Keith's awesome, Kevin McGonigal's awesome and whatnot. Like maybe it's easier to move Bryce Rayner for something that could impact you now and into the future. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying they have a farm system that's really good. They have Jose Briseño, who's somebody else who's a top 50 prospect. Like they have the ammunition to pull off the type of trade that could push them over the top as well.
And my final question for you, Clay, before we let you go, you mentioned Scott Harris and how maybe the narratives have changed around him, but the ownership, with Chris Ilitch, and there's a lot of backlash towards him that a lot of people thought he was cheap. He's not his dad. He's not going to spend and this, that, and the other. Has what the Tigers done this offseason, moving their payroll to a top 10 payroll, going out and getting Valdez, bringing Verlander back, bringing back several players from last season. Do you think, the sentiment and the narratives around Scott Harris, but more importantly, Chris Ilitch and ownership, do you think the thoughts around them have changed within the fan base and nationally as well?
Absolutely. If it were to be, we just want to be cheap, Gleyber Torres would not be on the team right now. You wouldn't give out a $21 million, and you could paint it so perfectly. We didn't bring Torres back. We want Keith to move to his natural position of second base. Or we didn't bring Torres back. We have Kevin McGonigal. We believe in, like, it's easy. It's the easiest thing ever to not bring him back and save 21 million. Instead, they said we need a vet in here who's a righty who can be near the top of the lineup. And then the Valdez money and the way that they did that, and then following it up with Verlander right after learning that Scooble won his ARB case, like those are things you cannot debate. There's absolutely no debate. If they would have signed another, even if they signed, Lucas Giolito and did not sign Verlander or Valdez, there would be some argument either way. Are they cheap? Are they not? Are they this? Are they that? I don't know what he could have done differently besides also signing Alex Bregman to show, at least for now, hey, look, like we're being serious. You all, the team has earned this. The fan base deserves it. I'm going to put my money up. And that's what, there was a quote that came out, I saw it today, from Chris Illigan. When you spend the money he did this offseason, you get to say what you want, truth or not. You kind of just get the ability to do that. And he talked about listening to Scott Harris's presentation on Valdez and Verlander, and he said, why can't we just get them both? And Scott Harris said something along the lines of, let me finish my presentation because that's the plan. So to me, I think that anyone that had ill will towards him has to at least be silent for now. I don't think they'll sign Scooble. I'm sure these narratives will come back in less than a year because of that. But for now, I think he's earned the right for everyone to, shut up about talking about how he's not spent, even though that was just.
Well, Clay, thanks so much again for joining us. We love talking. I love picking your brain, especially on the Detroit Tigers. Where can fans find your stuff, and where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, I write at justbaseball.com about the whole league, but most specifically about the Tigers, the Reds, and the A's are kind of my three teams I mostly cover. And then I am on Twitter at Clay_Snowden2, I believe it is, something like that. If you just search me, you'll find me.
Absolutely. You got any final thoughts, Brian?
I do. Dude, you're just you're an encyclopedia. So I'm thinking one episode we have you on, man, it's going to be, we can geek out about analytics and sabermetrics and all that stuff. If that's something that interests you, let us know. Cause
Of course.
I think that would be fantastic. So
yeah. And I'm not, I don't know the 1 percentile of knowledge and all that, but I'm pretty good at it, and I'm willing to do anything. And if people are out there and they don't know about it and they want to learn more, you can shoot me a DM. I'm happy to show you kind of how to do it or where to look, what websites, how to read it, whatever it is.
I'm guessing who the Tigers, who led their team in doubles in, seventh inning or after for the month of August. I'm sure, you just have that vibe, man. It's awesome. Because one of my favorite books and movies is Moneyball, and I know Dan will say the same thing. And just that part of it, those numbers, man. It's just, I love talking about it. So yeah, we'd love to have you on to get deep into that stuff.
Absolutely, would love to. Appreciate you all.
Absolutely, thanks, Clay. Have a great night.
Yep, you have a good one.
Thanks, Clay.
Good stuff, Brian.
God, it is. My technical issues aside, I got to hear, all of them, and he's just a smart guy, and I love hearing his perspective on things. And like you, he's very bullish on Kevin McGonigal. And that's what stood out to me with this conversation, right? Is that very bullish on Kevin McGonigal, to the point where he said, even if he doesn't start the season with the club, at some point, and probably pretty early on, he's going to be up. Which is a big deal.
And that's why I asked, because that's the tough part, because this roster is so set. It was the entire playoff roster is back. So somebody's going to have to get bumped out unless there's injury, which you hope doesn't happen. You hope that's not the case, where that's how he gets his spot. But, assuming there's no injuries, somebody's going to have to get bumped out. And who is that guy going to be? He brought up Wenzel Perez, and that's the name I've brought up when we've talked about this in the past. And
but what if Wenzel Perez has a great spring?
I know.
You know what I'm saying? And then you're in a situation where you're going to move a guy who's out of options, like he said, Jahmai Jones, and you have to DFA him, and then you risk losing him, or you try to trade somebody, but then is it going to be a package? You know what I'm saying? Then you got to get creative, and I don't know if they're in that position yet or not. So yeah, like we said in November when we first had the end of season podcast, like it was going to be a fascinating off season and then going into the spring, and now it's just been ramped up. So yeah, this next month is going to be telling and fun to watch.
Because there is a lot of guys battling for spots to stay on this team that is a World Series contender. Guys obviously don't want to lose their spot. They don't want to definitely don't want to be DFA'd. And these guys have been, everybody that's on this roster is monumental to what they've done over the last 2 years. So it's gonna be some tough decisions, less injuries. A lot of times these things work themselves out.
Yeah.
With injuries and things like that. But if it doesn't, and Hinch and Harris are going to have a tough decision to make when it comes to the opening day roster.
I think so too. And I think, he brought up a few positions, and the one he mentioned that I really thought, I don't know how much we've talked about, was Spencer Torkelson. Like, which version are we going to get of him, right? Because that's a situation where if he struggles for the first half of the year out of the gate, like that's not something, he's still young enough where maybe you can trade him and get something of value, but like he's not going to get a massive return, right? So it's like, what do you do at that position? Like that's a position where, as we know, baseball, like that is a run producing position. And if you're not getting that, like your offense is really in trouble, right? So that's that to me might be a position that's, for me up there with the Parker Meadows situation.
Yeah. And I think another one it's key is Matt Vierling to see, because you've seen so many times, and when we went over when we did the retro show the other day and looked at the 2017, we went up and down that lineup. A lot of guys that were in their late 20s, early 30s that just faded away. Yeah. Especially I think like Craig Monroe, who just he was, kind of just a flash in the pan, and I don't even say a flash in the pan because he was had about 4 or 5 good years, and then he was just gone. He just faded away, and I wonder if maybe a Matt Vierling becomes that, maybe he's not able to get back to what he was in 2024. And Clay mentioned about, maybe McGonigal doesn't start the season on the opening day roster, but he comes up pretty quickly. Maybe Vierling's a guy that you see, they give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he has a slow spring. They give him the benefit of the doubt, and you see it in April. He just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that gets let go. I hope that's not the case. I'm not predicting that, but I can see a scenario where something like that were to play itself out. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting spring to see who wins some of these position battles, because if McGonigal has a hot spring, the way Hinch has done this, to having him start day one of spring, he had him stand up in front of the team and introduce himself, and Hinch asked him some questions. Like, these are all things you do to prepare a young guy to start opening day.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're giving them every opportunity to win the spot, it feels like.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, to your point about Vierling, like we're all talking like all of these guys, like we're envisioning the best case scenario that they're all going to have great springs, right? And you talked about like injuries are going to happen at some point, right? But we're thinking, oh no, the best case scenario, these guys are all going to play great. Well, somebody inevitably is going to play themselves out of a spot. And that's just going to happen. It just really depends on who's it going to be.
Yeah. And you hope the injuries aren't a part of it, but as we saw last year, they were huge.
It is,
right, with Meadows and Vierling, and we kind of knew early on that when those injuries happened, I'm like, they might not get anything from those two guys all year. And sure enough, they really didn't. Meadows came back, but he was nothing like he was.
More of a defensive replacement guy.
Replacement, and he wasn't even
the
defensive player that he was in 2024. It was pretty disappointing. So he is such a high ceiling, low floor guy. It is unreal. He could be a low 200 hitter, can't make contact, and then that feels like maybe that kind of factors into his defense a little bit. Or he can be, almost all-star level. Like that end of the year, 2024, August, September, October, he was all-star level. Like he was incredible.
Even if he's a bottom of the order 8-9 guy, which is kind of almost like a second leadoff hitter type thing, right? Like where he hits around 260 and plays really good defense and steals some bases. Like I think even right now, Tiger fans would take that. You know what I'm saying? And like I envision how awesome would it be? Because it's always cool. Like that's my favorite position and it's part of the lineup is like when you have a great leadoff hitter, they're just fun to watch, right? And but if he's even like a bottom of the lineup guy that can be serviceable, a little more than serviceable, I think we would take that right now.
Yeah, Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, gonna be fun. It's sort of, yesterday they lose 20-3, which was
And you see people losing their
I
mind. I'm like, these are not. They're getting their non-roster invitees are getting lit up, right?
yeah,
And
I
guys, I
texted
mean,
you.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, they showed that Aaron Judge hit 2 home
Yeah,
runs, and they said the two guys where I can't even repeat I don't know their names off the top
right.
of my head. I just don't know
No,
them. And I
no,
texted you, I'm like, yeah, not exactly Scooble and Valdez that he hit
no,
home runs off of. Like these
no.
guys they're non-roster invitees that you've never heard of. They're not going to make
Right.
the team. They're not going to be a part of the organization in a month.
Nope.
Like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter. The key out of that game was Kevin McGonigal's first at bat, and we heard Clay talk about it. Like he just looked like a vet, just taking what the pitcher gave him, knocked a sharp hit into left field. That's what you take out of that game. You take things out of that like that out of
Agreed.
Spring training. And then Max Clark today, 2 outs in the 9th, they're down a run, guy on second. And again, just taking what the pitcher gets him, hits a sharp, single into left field, brings in the run, like those are
cool.
little moments. Those are little moments that you go back with young guys that are, trying to make the team and trying to get to the next level. Those are little moments that can get them there and that you remember. So pretty cool first 2 days of spring training, and awesome to talk to Clay. We look forward to having him on more throughout the season and just picking his brain. He's incredibly smart guy, knows his stuff when it comes to baseball, no doubt about it. But Brian, so many things going on right now in Detroit sports. Very eventful time, and it's funny because a few weeks ago we talked about, man, what are we going to talk about, man? There's not and then it's just bam, bam, bam. All of a sudden things are happening. And when I start off, the Pistons came off the All-Star break and had a pretty high-profile matchup against the Knicks. Went into Madison Square Garden, and the Pistons had absolutely smoked the Knicks in the first 2 games, beat them by 30 plus, I believe, both times. And, this was a thought that, the Knicks are going to be ready to play for this one. They'd have everybody in the lineup. The first 2 matchups, they had some guys out. And the Pistons had Isaiah Stewart and Duren both not playing. They're in their front line. And he thought this was, if the Knicks are going to get them, this would be the game that they're going to get the Pistons. And the Pistons went right in there and just completely dominated again. Completely dominated from the beginning to end. And Cade Cunningham had an MVP caliber game. In the mecca of the NBA, and it's Madison Square Garden. Everybody was talking about it locally, and everybody was talking about it nationally. It was a huge story, and man, we got a true superstar on our hands, Brian, an MVP caliber player in Cunningham, and he might be number 1 right now in terms of who people think is going to actually win this thing.
He might be, and like they could have easily, like, they're still a pretty young team, right? Like, and they could have easily come out and just been on cruise control the second half of this season, right? Right after the All-Star break, and going into New York, and if they would have lost, there would have been no shame. Like, oh, okay, you're missing 2 guys, and the Knicks were desperate, but like that didn't happen. That's a pretty cool thing to see, right? Like what they're saying, they're not worried about their opponents. They're going to still play at that high level and finish strong, which is pretty awesome. And like, keep in mind that like we're still thinking, people are thinking like, they're the number 1 team in the East, and they're the favorite to get to the NBA finals, but really they haven't won a home playoff game in a long time. And people sometimes,
18 years.
you're right. And we sometimes forget that, even like not a playoff series, but a home playoff game. Right. Yeah. And so it's one of those years, like it does. I mean, with them being so young, and if I believe they're going to finish with a 1 seed, like you don't want to say like, hey, championship or bust, right? Because that might not be fair to these guys. But like, if you're going by the natural progression, right, of how things typically go for championship teams, like win a series first, But to your point, regardless, to your point, like, yeah, awesome to see, because we felt like the Pistons were bad for so long, and then they had the lottery, bad luck where they could have taken Victor Wembanyama. I'm gonna forget his name, right? And they didn't get the number 1 pick, and it ended up being Jaden Ivey, and that didn't work out. I mean, so it's pretty awesome to see that it's come together like this. And Trajan Langdon, man, like what a dude! Like, great. I mean, awesome job as the GM of the Pistons, and getting them to this position.
It is an interesting spot to be in as a fan, because you watched that game the other night against the Knicks and how they played with their front line missing, and you saw how Cade played. You can't come out of that and not think they can win the whole thing, right? But to your point, they have not won a home playoff game in 18 years.
No.
And as we've seen many Pistons teams in the past that did win a championship, they had to go through some agony. They had to go through the steps to get there. But I would also say we look at the Lions a couple years ago, and you bring this up all the time. Their first year of this Dan Campbell era where they made it, they got to the NFC Championship game and blew a 17-point lead. And now looking back on it, we're thinking, holy cow, that might be, at least to this point, we know it is the closest they've gotten. And it might end up being the closest they ever get. And Campbell actually mentioned that after the game in the press conference. So when you take that into consideration, it kind of you don't necessarily are guaranteed these opportunities.
No,
they're 6-7 games up in the East right now. They're dominating teams. They look incredible. Like it has to be the thought process. We're going to go win the whole freaking thing. This is a championship or bust season. That has to be the expectation in the fan base, but even more importantly within that team. And
I'm
sure I bring this up, Brian, because Langdon came out and said that he basically he came out and said that isn't the expectation to win a championship. And I thought that was wrong to say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, like win a home playoff game, but also like, as we know, the NBA playoffs are different than the regular season, right? Like possessions are more valued and end of game situations are different and matchups are so critical. Like I remember the years like when the Pistons lost Ben Wallace and then signed Chris Webber, but like he was such a matchup issue for them. Like they didn't even play him. I mean, it was just weird. So, I mean, those things are going to happen. Like when they get to a best of 7, right? And then it's tied 2-2, matchups, who's playing well, who's not, how those adjustments by JV Bickerstaff, like all those things have to happen first. And there are so many other teams in the East. And then obviously Oklahoma City or whoever comes out of the West who've had those situations, who've been in those situations before. This team really, as this collective, has never been in that type of situation. So that's like all those things have to happen first. I mean, it would be awesome. Like, it's obviously want to win a championship. You're the 1 seed, but remember even the Pistons. I want to say the 03 Pistons. They were the 1 seed and lost to the Nets, right? That year. So I mean, in the conference finals before they overcame it, right? So there's a lot still that has to happen. I mean, so far, like, yeah, heck yeah, it looks great. Everything is awesome. They're playing really well. So just I think like anything, like one of the things we struggle with as sports fans is like try to enjoy it. Just enjoy this ride right now, right? Like, yeah, I mean, and we're stressing out about that. Let's just have fun with it and enjoy it because it was so bad for so long.
When I say that, expectations, are championship and championship or bust, like what I mean by that, it's going to be disappointing if they don't win.
Of course.
But I'm going to enjoy the ride every step of the way because, as we said, they haven't won a home playoff game in 18 years. That was an awful stretch. And they broke the record for most losses in a row just a couple years ago. Like, we've seen some really bad basketball in this town for a really long time. So to be where they're at now, even if it has come way quicker than we anticipated, and they're the number 1 team in the East, by a pretty large margin right now. Like, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy this every step of the way. I enjoyed the heck out of that game against the Knicks the other night. And my wife and I are going to go for Laura's birthday on Wednesday. We're going to go to the OKC game.
Awesome.
Because he's in town. That's going to could be an NBA Finals preview. And for regular season games, it doesn't get much bigger than that. To have OKC, the defending champs, in town, and a potential NBA Finals preview. I'm sure it's going to be crazy at the LCA on Wednesday. And I'm looking forward to going to that game, man.
That'd be fun. Like, in the championship or bust mentality, I think is like, here's the way I look at it. If the Pistons don't win a championship this year, this core is returning, right? So it's not bust. It's not like, oh, we got to break it up. Like, no, like they're still coming back, right? Like some of those years where I think the Lions are almost getting to that point because of the quarterback position. Like, okay, it's like championship or bust. Right. I mean, you're getting there. So,
well, the other part with the Lions too, Brian, is that they're starting to have to pay these guys.
No, they're right.
You're losing the depth of your team. And that's what's going to happen with the Pistons at some point. But they're so far down the line. That's what's so great about this. This is so early in the development to have this happen. So they got a little bit more room than where the Lions are currently. The Lions, they've already had to pay some guys, and they're going to have to pay some guys in the next year or two. So the so-called window is starting to close maybe a little bit on the Lions in terms of having the best case scenario and the best opportunities. But the Pistons, it's just starting. So It's exciting times, man. It's exciting
Mhm.
times for Detroit basketball, and man, what a performance by Kate Cunningham the other night at MSG. Just put himself, right up there nationally. I think a lot of people now are starting. If they didn't know who he was before the other night, they definitely know who he is now. And man, we got a superstar on our hands with Kate Cunningham. It's pretty exciting.
We do enjoy it.
Another story that Brian, you found pretty fascinating, and that's the situation with it's not necessarily a local story, but we're going to try to turn it into a local story. That's the situation with the Chicago Bears. A pretty fascinating deal where it looks like they're going to be headed to going to Indiana, and they're looking to get a new stadium. Soldier Field is starting to wear down a bit. And they've been trying to make a deal to keep it in Chicago. They've been looking all throughout Illinois and just have not been able to get a deal done. And now they are looking, and not only looking, but it feels like things are kind of leaning the way of them going to Indiana. Brian, I know this was a story that kind of hit you and you found incredibly interesting. What are your thoughts on this whole deal?
I think there's obviously the political part of it. There's right there's the financial part. There's all of that stuff that goes into it. It got me thinking, right? So in my lifetime, Cleveland Browns moving to Baltimore was shocking. I mean, just crazy, right? And the St. Louis Rams going back to LA. I mean, okay, that was all goofy too, but the Browns leaving, it's like, wow, okay, that got me thinking, like, gosh, how horrible would it be for a Detroit team to make a move that drastic, right? So if they were to go, if one of the Detroit sports teams were to move to, say, like, I know you talked about, like, well, the Pistons played in Auburn Hills and the Lions played in Pontiac, but I'm talking, like, if they leave the state, or the Red Wings were to go to Windsor, like, something about that just doesn't feel right. Even if they still are the Detroit Red Wings and they play in Windsor, like, there's something about that, like, the civic pride almost. I don't feel good with that. I would not feel good with any of the Detroit sport teams going to Northern Ohio, for example, right? Or Northern Indiana, because I mean, Michigan's right on the border with Indiana too. So just wild and fascinating. And I mean, I've researched it, looked into it, and saw a bunch of fan takes and stuff like that. And some it's probably split. I think some of the fans are like, "Who cares? Like, it's 20 minutes away. It's not a big deal, right? Whatever. We're still Bears fans. We're still called the Bears." And there are others that are just like, "No, this is like going to Soldier Field, like driving by, Lakeshore Drive and seeing it. It's a cool thing, and knowing the Bears are there." So it just got me thinking about, like, okay, if the Lions were to move to Northern Ohio and their training camp was down, like, that would not sit well with me. And
I
not that
think
I mean, and I guess I feel for Bears fans. I mean, even though they're our rival, right? But yeah, I mean, whatever. Like, you feel for them a little bit.
I think it would bother me more just as a citizen of the state, as
Yeah,
opposed to my fan aspect. Because as a fan, it's like, all right, especially in
correct.
this case, if you're you know in the kind of Metro Chicago area, this isn't that big of a deal in terms of distance or anything of that nature. So it's not like it's going to be like an hour or two added to their drive. It's 10-15 minutes most likely added to their drive. So it's not that big of a deal in that standpoint. But if you're a citizen of Chicago, or you're a citizen of the state of Illinois, this should piss you off. Like, get the deal done. They've been here your entire
Yep.
life. Like, this is not only that, but it brings tourism. It brings
Hmm.
money to the area. It's good for so many of the restaurants in different places that, in Chicago. To have the Bears move out, it's really bad for the city. And it becomes a political issue, and it's like, well, man, just get it done. Like, figure it out. Like, how are
I
you going to allow
Right.
the Bears to move out of Chicago? Like, they should be playing in Chicago. Like,
Yeah.
it's the Chicago Bears. I agree
Yes.
with you in that sense. And from a political standpoint, I'd be incredibly angry if I was a citizen.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, and you brought it up again, the comparison. The Pistons played in Auburn Hills for a while, and the Lions played in Pontiac. Again, it's still the state of Michigan, though, and it was still like, you still felt that, like, everybody was still prideful. And I don't know if any of our teams were to play in Northern Ohio or Windsor, maybe we would still feel that pride. But gosh, I don't know. I don't know. It would just be different, and not a fan of it, man.
Well, the good
Huh,
thing is I don't think we're going to be dealing with that anytime soon.
no.
With Little Caesars Arena being fairly new, Pistons and Red Wings both playing there. Neither one of them are going to be moving anytime soon, and
No.
there's no way the Fords would move the Lions out of Detroit at this point, or at least out
Mm,
of the state of Michigan. I don't think
mm.
there's any chance of that ever happening. The Tigers are going to be due for a new ballpark, I think, pretty soon. You know, it's what, we're 26 years in now.
Yeah.
So usually around the 30-year mark is usually the time you start looking at, you know, in this day and age, you start looking to maybe get a new stadium. So who knows? They did, you know, make some renovations recently. You know, you fixed the scoreboard, you know, did some different things around the ballpark. So maybe it does have, you know, more life than maybe I'm giving it credit for. But we'll see. I would say that would probably be the next team that would get a new stadium would be the Tigers. But we'll see what happens.
And
I still wonder, like, and I know the logistics of it, but it's still crazy to me that nothing's along the water. You have this incredible waterfront,
it is
and
true.
you don't utilize it within. You got all 4 teams playing down there, but nobody plays in that area. It's kind of wild to me.
No, you're right. And Joe Louis was down there for a little bit in the Red Wings, but it wasn't developed at that time, and it really wasn't like, hey, let's go hang out on the waterfront or anything like that. And I was just down there a couple weeks ago watching my daughter play volleyball at the Huntington place, and we walked out, and it was a nice day, and I was like, gosh, like this could be so cool. Like it's better. I mean, it is better, but like you're right, it could definitely be pretty, you know, utilized.
Like I said, I don't know, you know, the dimensions and everything, and in terms of the land and how that could work, and maybe it's just not feasible. I don't know, but I just think about what a baseball field could look like if you had, you know, the river in the background, kind of like how the Giants, you know, have. You see people on boats, you know, outside the stadium, and I just think that'd be so freaking cool, man. But like I said, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what the dimensions, if it's even feasible for something like that to happen. But man, would I love that, you know, down the road in the future for something like that to happen. But
that would be fun. I will say though, I like Comerica Park where it's at now, and the skylines at center field.
The skyline is,
you know
fantastic.
what I mean? It's pretty
I love
cool.
Comerica.
And even if you sit in other parts of the stadium, when you see the, you know, the sun setting, it's like, oh wow. Like behind home plate, that's like, wow, that's pretty awesome. So
yeah, I don't mean to diminish Comerica. I love Comerica. I love going down there. I cannot wait to be down there. Some of the summer nights that we got ahead of us, man, with the Tigers, it's gonna be incredible. So another big story today, Brian, was the Olympic gold medal game, the hockey gold medal game. USA versus Canada. It was the final event of the 2026 Winter Olympics, and man, really special. You know, the USA wins the first gold medal in hockey since, you know, the famous 1980 Miracle on Ice team. You know, been 46 years since they had won it, and man, what an incredible game against Canada today. The USA wins 2-1 in overtime, and Jack Hughes gets the golden goal to win it for the American team, and you can see it here with this tweet. But just all 4 players that were on the ice, so it's in overtime. It's, you know, they play 3-on-3, so you got the goalie and then the 3 skaters, and all 4 were from the Michigan area. You know, how cool was that, Brian? And did you get a chance to watch the game today at all?
Oh yeah.
You know, what do you think about that, man? So many Michiganders playing such a huge factor in this
game.
Oh
yeah, it felt like playoff hockey. Like it was cool. It was like, you know, game 7, like playoff hockey in overtime, and it was a lot of fun. And Hollybuck, like I mean, if he wasn't the MVP, I don't think they, you know, have a, you know what I'm saying? But like, don't kid yourself. Like he was the reason I think they won that game, right? He had some amazing saves, and yeah, he's from Commerce, Michigan. Pretty cool story there. Yeah, again, a lot of civic pride. Those guys like are all from this area. Pretty neat thing. And did the Olympics feel different for you with Russia not being in it? Like, I think. I don't know if Russia would have been in the gold medal game against either the United States or Canada regardless, right? But it did feel a little bit different, not to diminish or downplay this gold medal. It's just pretty awesome. But I wish Russia was in it. Like, and I know there's, you know.
I don't know if it diminished it. I think it was, you know, everybody was looking forward to the USA-Canada matchup. That's what everybody wanted. And that's what we ended up getting. And it was an incredible game. So I don't think it diminishes it at all. I do think just in general, in terms of the Olympics, I think the buzz might have been down a little bit just because of the timing of it. Yeah. Because it seemed like most of the events were happening, you know, 9 to 5, you know, when everybody's at work. So it wasn't, you know, I mean, you can watch it on tape delay. You know, NBC did, you know, their primetime coverage, but it was, you know, that's all on tape delay. You kind of know the results already of the events and things like that. So I think that maybe that diminished it a little bit. At least for me, it did. You know, the Summer Olympics, you know, my wife and I watched a ton of that. And, you know, I wonder if if the Winter Olympics had been, at the time frame that, the events were happening live in prime time, that, I'm sure I would have watched, quite a bit more than I did. So I wonder if that played a factor for a lot of people. But I don't know, Brian, what are your feelings on the Olympics? I know for me, I'm a lot bigger fan of the Summer Olympics than I am of the Winter Olympics. There's just a lot more events that I enjoy a little bit more. But what are your just general thoughts, on the Olympics?
Well, other than swimming, I like the Winter Olympics better. Like I like the hockey, I like the luge, I like the bobsled. And crazy, like I've always liked curling, but I've had more people talk to me about curling this Olympics than I can remember because there was a little spat with was it
Yeah.
Canada and Sweden, right? And that was kind of cool. And like, oh, the finger was on the rock too long and pushed or whatever. Like it was kind of neat though. And I've always liked curling. I thought it was pretty cool and fun. And so and obviously the hockey part is what puts it over the top for me. Now I think if the Olympics had baseball still and it was as passionate as hockey was or hockey is, I probably would like the Summer Olympics more, but the baseball's not in the Olympics.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm the winter for me.
I just love all the sprinting competitions,
So
world's fastest man, world's fastest woman.
yeah.
And I find those fascinating. I love watching those and the relay races and all the different stuff that they got with
Yeah.
that. All the track and field
Yep.
events. I love watching those.
I mean,
So,
this is like picking like who's your favorite grandparent. Like they're both awesome. Like you know what I mean. Like they're both fun to watch and fun to and can be enjoyable. But I'm with you with the time difference. Like that was a challenge.
I think
for
that played a
that was
factor.
the challenge for me for sure. Mm,
Yeah. Then we can wrap up with Olympic talk.
Yeah.
And just, final topic I want to get into, Brian, is, college basketball. University of Michigan had, two huge matchups this week. Earlier this week, they went into Purdue, a big, huge Big Ten matchup. Kind of were able to wrap up the Big Ten in a lot of ways. Really give them a huge opportunity to win it by going into Purdue and beating them by double digits. And, really wasn't that close. I know Purdue kind of made it a little bit interesting down the stretch, but Michigan was never really in danger in that game. And I thought that was maybe their most impressive win of the season because Mackey Arena can be an incredibly tough place to play. And Purdue, playing at a top 10 level like they have been, for Michigan to go in there and play the way they did, I thought was incredibly impressive.
I think I agree with you. And it's obvious to me, and then after what happened yesterday with the Duke game, and I know you're going to talk about, right? Like to me, Michigan, Duke, and Arizona and Houston, like those are the four teams, in my opinion, that I feel like have the least flaws. Like Houston was seconds away from winning a national championship a year ago, and a lot of those guys return, high recruiting class, right? And like, so they might be the one that people might say, "Oh, you sure about that?" But to me, Michigan, Duke, and Arizona for sure have absolutely separated themselves from everybody else. And like there's definite tiers. Like there are good teams. Like I know, locally, Michigan State is still a good team. Like, gosh, they're 22-5. And they're like, you know what I mean? Which is crazy. And they're not even like right now because Michigan has done what they've done. They're just an afterthought, right? But there are a lot of good teams. But to me, the three or four, like I think, like I haven't done a bracket in like 5 years. Like it doesn't interest me anymore. Like it just doesn't. But if I were to do it, to me, this is like the year of chalk. Like I just think the favorites, like those guys that are so much better than everybody. And Arizona has done it. It's kept afloat without arguably their best player, the freshman Pete. Like he's not even playing. You know what I'm saying? And so, it's been. And at this point in the season, like we talked about the Pistons potentially being on cruise control. No, it doesn't look like Michigan is on. Any of these teams are on cruise control. But really, like there's not much Michigan can do to drop from the one line. And they'll be a number one seed. And same with any of those teams. Like Houston, they're the one that might not get the number one because Iowa State still, playing pretty well, and UConn and whatnot. But to me, Arizona, Michigan, and Duke, they're no doubt like the number one seeds. There's really nothing they can do.
Sure.
And there's really nothing they can do to hurt that. So I think they've separated themselves.
And you brought up the Michigan Duke game from last night, and we had talked about I think on the podcast and off the podcast, but you didn't think Michigan was going to lose. You think they're going to win the whole thing, and
I do.
I brought up, man, it's one and done in the tournament, man. You have one bad shooting night, you run into a team that's shooting lights out, like you just never know. And we saw how Michigan played against Duke, man. They just had an awful shooting night, and they got beat. Duke's a great team, obviously.
I think
they're a fantastic team, but
yeah.
Michigan they just had an awful shooting night, and that can happen. That
And
can happen in the tournament.
But that's possible that like Duke did that to them, right? Like how many teams are going to do that to Michigan? Do you know what I'm saying? Like to me, that was a Duke thing. Like Duke physically, they're the only team, at least from watching it from TV, was physically like right there with Michigan. Like not many teams, nobody else I think to this point has been like that against Michigan. I think that was a huge thing. And what would also be a fun debate is which format do you prefer, the one and done tournament or a best of series? Because there's some cool things to both, right? As you just mentioned, as a fan or as a coach or a player, like how awful would it be? Like you're so talented, you have that one bad game and you're out. Or if you're in a best of 7, okay, like we had that bad game, now we're gonna adjust and and be fine. Like that'd be a fun one day maybe to have that debate. But for this, you're right. I just still think like Michigan, their depth is still. I think these two teams will be Final Four teams. Like, I do.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they're destined for a rematch. It's very possible to have a rematch in the Final Four. And these are two of the best teams in the country. There's no question about it. But I just found it, interesting watching that game. I'm like, yeah, they're not completely dominant. They're not just going to run through everybody and win the whole thing. Like there's definitely opportunities for them to lose.
But imagine this is an NBA season and they're 25-2, right? Like everybody is saying, like, holy heck, like they are dominant. Like that's kind of the comparison I go back to. Is like, geez, like if this is an NBA team, good Lord, like everybody's talking about what an amazing team they are. So, but you're right. It'll be fun. And they're still college kids and you never know with college kids. And,
they are,
I mean,
not your typical,
no, I mean, they're 23, 24-year-old college kids, a couple of them, but, no, but still it'll be fun to watch. It'll be a fun tournament.
And what do you think about Michigan State? And you mentioned them a little bit, still a fantastic record. They're having a great season, but they seem to be very, the Big Ten is so competitive. There's so many good teams in the Big Ten, and Michigan State's going through a run where it's been a little bit up and down. They got smoked by Wisconsin, last week, and that was concerning to see them just come out and get steamrolled by a team you thought on paper they were better than. But they had a game, a couple weeks ago where they go out and beat Illinois, which is a top 10 team in the country. So it's a question of what Michigan State team are you going to get, and they've just been so inconsistent lately. But do you think they're going to be able to get it together? By the time we get to March and we get to the tournament, that this is Izzo's time, as we know. Like, is he going to be able to get this team, to make a deep run in the tournament?
I guess what would you consider to be a deep run? Like
I'd say Elite Eight.
I mean, sure. I think if the matchups are right, and they're not going up against a team like if they try to match possession for possession, basket for basket, they're not going to win. Yeah. Like that's unfortunate for them, right? They just don't have a lot of pure scorers on their team. So yeah, I think their ceiling is Elite Eight and or potentially Final Four if that's the right path. There was something telling today, and I wonder how Michigan State fans thought about it. And so the other day on one of the local radio shows here, 97.1, they had talked about, the question was, do you think Michigan State fans are jealous of what Dusty May and Michigan are doing? And I didn't listen to the segment, but I can only imagine what it's about because we've talked about it before, right? Where Michigan has gone the transfer route, right? And they're having this success. And so I think it's obvious. And then today, Tom Izzo, after their game, their win against Ohio State, and I forgot the name of the player, but he was talking about a senior from Ohio State who they couldn't stop. And he said, when I talked to the kid after the game, I just told him I was super proud of him and it's been fun to watch. And, you could have easily, when things got tough, transferred, which is what everybody seems to be doing nowadays, but you stuck with it, and I still think like, man, like that's great. That's great to have those values. That's great to believe in that. That's great in development and good for that kid. I'm proud of him. Right. But what if he transfers to, what if, maybe he considered transferring to Duke or Florida or UConn or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And then he's playing for a
What if he considered transferring to Michigan State?
What if he considered transferring to Michigan State, right? So like, I still wonder, like, fair or not, when fans, they're all for like, hey, standing with their coach and their program for doing what's right, and no, we're not changing, we're going to do it the right way, the development and so on, and so on and so forth. But then when you don't win or your rival wins a national championship, then does that narrative change? And it has to.
And if you start getting smoked by your rival.
And you start
Repeatedly.
and it was still a double-digit loss, wasn't it? When they lost to
in
Michigan.
their house.
In that, right? It was a great game for a long time up until the last 6, but it was still a double-digit loss. Like, at what point are people going to be like,
And the
so,
reason I bring that aspect up, and who knows, maybe that doesn't go that way. Maybe they go back
Mhm.
and forth, but it feels like it's going to start going that way. And
Oh,
it just reminds me so much of Harbaugh's years before the win or
yeah,
die trying statement.
yeah,
And we know what they did and the things that happened, but they got in the
yeah.
mud a little bit and went against their core values that they had for so long. And they got
But
in the mud a little bit and did some things that they said in the past they wouldn't do. But what did it do? It
won a
brought a
national
national
champ.
championship.
Adapt
So
or
at the end of the
die.
day, is Izzo willing to get in the mud a little bit, so to speak, and do some things that he doesn't want to do in order to get over the hump, be on the level or above his rival, and to win national championships?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
And that's and it is what it is. And Michigan State can now play and the fans can now play but he's been in the tournament so many years in a row and he's taken teams that were 4 seeds and lower to Final Fours. Like, yeah, that's great. Like, whoop-de-doo at some point, right? If Michigan now is playing this game and you're not, I mean, congratulations. Like, it's still, I mean, the dynamic has just changed, and I don't think Tom Izzo's changing. And the question will be when he retires, like, what will the Michigan State brass do? Like, will they still hire one of Tom Izzo, like, from one of his trees, or are they going to go outside and be like, no, like, we're getting the best available coach, and here's how we're doing things. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it is going to be real interesting when he does finally retire. Where do they go? Like, what do they stay with something that's similar? Because I feel like he can't do that. Like,
He
can't go that
knows
way anymore.
he has to, like, it would be different if he recruited at a level like Duke, right? And I know next year they have like number 1 or number 2 recruiting class, depending on who you watch. Like, but they unless like Cameron Boozer, you know what I'm saying? Like at Duke, unless they're getting him every year, like, I don't think you can win national titles anymore with just development. It can't just be development. Like, it just can't be. So,
No.
no.
I agree with you, Brian. Any final thoughts before we jump off here?
No, man. Great night. It's good stuff. Look forward to the next one, Dan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we thank Clay Snowden for coming on again. Always fun talking to him, talking Tigers baseball. But that will wrap it up for tonight. For Brian Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you again down the road.